Good day, everyone. We are Group 5 presenting case number 2. So, in our case, a 26-year-old female patient was diagnosed with left frozen shoulder freezing stage. The patient complains of a gradual increase in limitation of motion and pain over her left shoulder, causing difficulty in her activities of daily living, specifically donning and docking of her undergarments. The patient's current pain scale is 7 out of 10.
First question, discuss the mechanism of the disease. The patient is experiencing a frozen shoulder, which is also known as adhesive capsulitis. It describes a pathological process in which the body forms excessive scar tissue or adhesions across the glenohumeral joint caused by inflammation of the said structure, which leads to stiffness, pain, and dysfunction. When the tissues in your shoulder joint become thicker and tighter, scar tissue develops over time. So as a result, your shoulder joint doesn't have enough space to rotate properly. Because of the painful stiffness of the shoulder, it can adversely affect activities of daily living and consequently impair quality of life. Frozen shoulder also involves fibrosis and or contracture of the following: tendons, joint capsule, and other soft tissue surrounding the glenohumeral joint, specifically the rotator cuff interval. Unlike most injuries, it's more of an underuse injury than an overuse injury. It might appear to have a cause, but it's more often triggered by a period of shoulder immobilization, such as being stuck in a sling after a fracture or stroke. However, it may also occur after a trauma to the area, even when there is no pronounced immobilization. The symptoms of FS are as follows. First, range of motion fails slowly and painfully, usually just on one side. Second, having trouble reaching bra clasps, hip pockets, and back itches. Third, painful early stage mostly involves aching or burning deep in the shoulder joint, sometimes extending into the upper arm. Fourth, it's often worse at night. And fifth, sudden movements can cause surges of much sharper and more extreme pain. We must also note that frozen shoulder occurs in up to 5% of the population, and females are 4 times more often affected than men, while the non-dominant shoulder is more prone to be affected. Additional information to FS is that it can either be primary or secondary. Primary idiopathic FS occurs spontaneously without any specific trauma or inciting event. On the other hand, secondary FS results from known cause, predisposing factor, or surgical event. Predisposing factors include post-surgery, post-stroke, and post-injury. There are also three subcategories of secondary FS. First is systematic, second is extrinsic factors, and third is intrinsic factors. Moving on, the condition has three stages: freezing, frozen, and thawing. In the freezing stage, the patient will experience a gradual onset of shoulder pain at rest with sharp pain at extremes of motion. There will be sleep interruption in night due to pain, and it lasts for 2 to 9 months. The second stage is the frozen stage, wherein pain starts to subside. There will be a progressive loss of GH motion in capsular pattern, and the pain is apparent only at extremes of movement. This stage may occur at around 4 months and last until about 12 months. Last is the thawing stage, where it is spontaneous. There is progressive improvement in functional range of motion and can last anywhere from 5 to 24 months. Since there is no indication that the patient has underlying injuries or diseases that could have triggered the complication, we therefore conclude that the female patient experienced primary FS.
Next question. What are the different structures affected by the patient's condition? Explain. As mentioned in the name of the patient's condition, the structures affected are the shoulder joint capsule and the muscles that stabilizes the shoulder joint, specifically the rotator cuff muscles. Let's first tackle the anatomy of the shoulder joint. First is the articulating surfaces of the joint are the head of the humerus and the glenoid cavity or fossa of the scapula. Together, they are known as the glenohumeral joint. These two structures are covered with hyaline cartilage that also lessens the friction between the humeral head and the glenoid fossa. Next is the joint capsule, which is a fibrous sheath that encloses the joint. It extends from the neck of the humerus to the border of the glenoid fossa, and it is often lax, which permits greater range of motion. In the inner surface of the capsule lies the synovial membrane, which produces synovial fluid, and together with the hyaline cartilage, the synovial membrane reduces friction between the two articulating surfaces. Next are the ligaments. There are three ligaments that forms the capsule: superior, middle, and inferior glenohumeral ligaments. They are the main source of stability of the shoulder, holding it in place and prevents from dislocating the joint. The superior GH ligament limits external rotation and inferior translation of humeral head. The middle GH ligament limits external rotation and anterior translation of humeral head, and together with the superior GH ligament, it arises from the glenoid and inserts on the anatomical neck of the humerus, whereas the inferior GH ligament arises from the glenoid and inserts into the humerus just beyond the lesser tuberosity. The anterior portion of the ligament limits external rotation and superior anterior translation of the humeral head, while the posterior portion limits internal rotation and superior translation of the humeral head. Lastly is the coracohumeral ligament, which consists of two bands that bridges the coracoid process dorsolaterally at its base to the lesser and greater humeral tubercles. The anterior division limits extension and the posterior division limits flexion. Both division limits inferior and posterior translations of the humeral head and supports the superior part of the joint capsule. There is also the rotator interval capsule, which is a triangular space of the shoulder capsule that lies between the supraspinatus and the subscapularis tendons. This triangular space contains the superior GH ligament and coracohumeral ligament. Moving on to the bursae. They are fluid-filled sacs that serve to lubricate joints and body surfaces exposed to higher degrees of wear and friction. We are specifically discussing the subacromial bursa for this case since it helps a group of muscles and tendons known as the rotator cuff to function. The subacromial bursae is bordered superiorly by the acromion, coracoid, coracoacromial ligament, and the proximal deltoid muscle fibers, and inferiorly by the fibers of the supraspinatus muscle. Lastly are the muscles. The primary muscles affected are the rotator cuff muscles, namely the subscapularis, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and the teres minor. They are the primary stabilizers that hold the ball of the humerus to the glenoid socket. These four muscles form a cuff around the humeral head, securing it firmly in the socket. These muscles are generally responsible for the abduction, medial, and lateral rotation of the shoulder joint. All in all, the mentioned structures, except for the articulating surfaces, become inflamed, causing a reduction in the space for movement, pain, and interruption of daily activities.
Third and final question, what motion is most likely limited in this condition? Explain. The condition would most likely limit the shoulder to perform external rotation because in frozen shoulder it involves the thickening and tightening of the shoulder capsule. Since all three ligaments that form the said capsule limits the external rotation of the shoulder, it further limits the patient to perform the said motion. As seen at the two pictures on the right, the PT demonstrated how the patient with FS would perform abduction with external rotation compared to a patient without the condition. Because of the said mechanism of disease of FS, they will not be able to fully abduct and laterally rotate their shoulder that would have permitted them to reach their head.
Other than ER, other ROMs are limited such as IR, abduction, adduction, flexion, and extension since the GH joint is a multi-axial ball and socket type of joint. Patients with FS commonly present with ROM restrictions in a capsular pattern. The shoulder joint has a capsular pattern where ER is more limited than abduction, which is more limited than IR.
To further see how patients with FS would perform each ROM, the PT demonstrates the difference between them and the patients without FS.
In flexion, the patient with FS would not be able to fully flex their upper limb where their arm would be adjacent to their head, whereas in extension, their arm would only be able to extend a few degrees past the gluteal region.
In external rotation plus internal rotation, the patient can only be able to either reach below the gluteal region or perpendicular to it. Unlike if there is no FS, they can reach up to the mid-back area.
In abduction, patients without FS can abduct wherein they can reach up to the ceiling. For cases of patients experiencing FS, they would start to lift the whole shoulder and bend their upper body once they go past 90 degrees to compensate for the shoulder's lack of mobility.
And that ends our case discussion, frozen shoulder. Thank you.